Hello and welcome, it's time for another episode of Bonus. In this episode for the gameplay, I have some Rise. One of the better looking Xbox One exclusives. It's not the best game in the world, but it's kind of good fun. It's a Roman themed hack and slash really, plenty of quick time events, but plenty of brutality and satisfying kills, so it balances out. I managed to find a copy relatively cheaply on eBay anyway, so it's one of those that I've always kind of wanted to play just to see what it was like, but I didn't want to drop full price on it. I've also been playing quite a lot of FTL this week as well with the new Advanced Edition update. It adds a whole bunch of new stuff. There's a new race with a new ship, there's new weapons, there's new encounters, basically a whole host of new ways for the random number generator to screw over your chances of victory. Apparently it's not that luck-based, apparently if you're good at it you can win most of the time. I'm not that person though. But you know, half the fun is in losing, or so they tell me. Anyway, let's get on with the questions. Edwin Scott says, Stu, F40 or 288 GTO? So this is my preference between two Ferraris. The 288 GTO is actually the predecessor to the F40. And it's funny you should ask, because I actually planned a Forza 5 video on the F40. You see, for me, the F40 is kind of the poster car of my generation. Alongside the Lamborghini Countach, I suppose, as well. That was kind of the wild and crazy one. But the F40, that was more refined, and yet somehow more powerful, more sleek. Of the F40 and the 288, I'd have to say the F40 is my favourite. Probably because it's the one I grew up with, it's my contemporary supercar. So it's the one I like it. I like the F40. I mean, how could you not like that back-end silhouette? It's beautiful. Anyway. Matthew McMillan says, have you thought of changing your name away from Xbox Ahoy to something more neutral? The thought has crossed my mind, but there are quite a few people who search for stuff like Xbox Ahoy weapon guides, and I don't want to lose those search results. So, there's a certain degree of brand recognition there, so to change my name could be harmful to that. Besides, we've been over this. It's just a name. It doesn't really mean anything. I post PC gameplay on my channel now as well. And as far as I'm concerned, the people who get hung up on my name and think, oh, Xbox is bad, they're just small-minded idiots. So, no immediate plans to change. I'm quite content with the channel name. It's fine. I like the branding. I like the green colour, the electric sea foam. And at the end of the day, it's the videos that are the most important thing. Which reminds me, I should make some videos. That was a joke. I am making videos. Chris Wilson says, how do you feel about Scotch eggs? I like Scotch eggs. If you ask me, Scotch eggs are an upgrade on your basic eggs in almost every single way. If you're not sure what a Scotch egg is, it's like a boiled egg wrapped in sausage meat, which is then covered in breadcrumbs. And the whole caboodles, it's cooked until it's golden brown, and it's delicious, it's nice, it's good. Yeah, it's meaty, it's eggy, it's breadcrumby. What more could you possibly want from an egg? Michael Stamp says, hey Stu, have you played Goat Simulator yet? I haven't, because I'm loath to pay $10 for what appears to be a joke game. It seems like it's been made for a certain sector of the YouTube audience, the kind of the PewDiePie style of video making. Oh, so random, epic meme, that sort of thing. Which, it's fine. I'm not attacking that style of videos, but, well, it's certainly not what I do. As far as the game itself is concerned, I was mostly disappointed that it's not a serious goat simulator, because I would quite like a hardcore ungulate simulator. I don't know what the challenge would be. I guess you just have to eat stuff and do other goaty things. But yeah, I don't know. Part of me thought that it was going to be a serious game, like a serious goat simulator. As it turns out, it looks like Tony Hawk and you're doing all these stupid flips and tricks and explosions, and it just doesn't make any sense. James C. says, have you ever played The Last of Us? And when, if it comes to the PS4, will you be purchasing it? I have played The Last of Us, yes. In fact, I quite enjoyed it. It's certainly one of the better games of 2013. I wouldn't rate it as Game of the Year, but I can see why some people might think of it as that, because it was pretty good. I liked the togetherness of the world. I liked how it was almost believable. There were lots of little artifacts and details which, despite the limited power of the PS3, it came together pretty nicely, I thought. As far as the gameplay is concerned, it was okay. It certainly didn't deliver on the artificial intelligence that was promised in some of the pre-release stuff, but at least the combat was slightly more interesting than your typical corridor shooter. I think the game has been announced for PS4 recently, but I refuse to buy it again at full price, because I've already paid full price for it at launch, haven't I? so I'm not likely to pick it up again. If it comes on PS Plus though, then brilliant. I might then give it another playthrough on the next gen system. Or in the future, you know, if I get bored and I fancy playing it again and I see it for £5 to £10, then maybe I'll pick it up. Maybe. Same goes with Tomb Raider. I bought that for Gen 7 and I've got no desire to buy it for Gen 8. Certainly not at 30, 40 quid. Definitely not. Walter White says, "Hey Stu, when it comes to selecting a refreshing beverage, what do you go for? Disregarding any alcohol altogether." Most refreshing beverage of all is, well, it's water, isn't it? I think water gets kind of overlooked in a lot of circumstances, but it's pretty good. It also helps that it's, well, basically free if you drink it out of the tap. I mean, I appreciate they do send me a bill every month for it, but it's, it's not consumption based, so you can drink as much as you like. Other than that, I do quite like carbonated water. If I'm in a restaurant and I'm not drinking any sort of alcohol, then I probably will just order a sparkling water. Again, it's refreshing, it doesn't sort of have any strong taste that gets in the way of the food, and it's just an all-round smashing drink. Having said that though, I do also like soft drinks. I'm quite partial to a spot of Diet Coke, and also Dr Pepper Zero. I used to like Diet Dr Pepper until they discontinued it in the UK. I think with drinks like that though, it's less about the refreshment and more about the caffeine. Elliot Jackson says, "Hello Stu, what is your favourite car? Mine is the Alfa Romeo Disco Volante." I like an Alfa. I like the 8C Competizione. That's a nice car. I'm not sure if I have an absolute favourite overall car though. I have plenty of cars that I like. One of the more attainable cars that I like is probably the Caterhams. I quite like the ultra lightweight cars. The Ariel Atom's quite nice as well, but I prefer the retro Lotus stylings of the Caterham designs. On the top end, I think I'm less about the sort of the obvious supercars, so you can keep your Ferraris and your Lamborghinis. It's the oddball cars that I always seem to identify with. I quite like the Spiker C8. It's a Dutch car of all things, but it's cool. It's weird. I like that. I have a bit of a soft spot for Maseratis as well. I really should learn how to drive at some point. I've got the provisional license. I just need to go through the whole taking the test thing. Bigger Gaming says, "Stu, you mentioned buying a new graphics card. Did you end up going middle of the road, or did you splurge on something a little more high-end?" I didn't spend too much. I got a GTX 760. It's a sizable jump from the 570 I had before. It also runs a lot quieter than the old fans on the 570. It's whisper quiet. And best of all, I can also now use Shadowplay, which is fantastic. I love Shadowplay. Miles better than any software recording solution. Really is. Fantastic it is. I just hope they support OpenGL at some point soon. So yeah, it's not the highest end card out there. I could have spent a lot more money. I could have gone for an SLI configuration. But as far as performance per pound is concerned, it's a good balance, and it's something I can afford to upgrade every year or so. Alfonso Navarro says, "Are you a fan of mech simulators? In your opinion, do the presence of mechs make Titanfall better or worse?" I wouldn't consider myself a traditional fan of the mech combat genre. I haven't really... I've dabbled in them a couple of times in the past, but I'm not really... No, it's not something I go for. As far as Titanfall's concerned, well, the game is designed around the Titans. They're an integral part of the gameplay, so I'd say, yeah, the game would probably be worse without them. It would certainly be different. There'd be... I don't know, I think it would be more frustrating in terms of combat if it was just pilot versus pilot. The Titans had a different dynamic. They had kind of a different focus. They're large targets, so they draw a lot of attention. So the combat kind of revolves around them. Whereas if you only had pilots, well, things might get a little bit campier, I suspect. RVB fan says, "Stu, have you seen the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers and The Pacific? If so, which do you like more and why?" Well, of the two, I've only seen Band of Brothers. So, well, Band of Brothers wins by default. I should probably watch The Pacific at some point, though. Son of Boba Fett says, "Ahoy, what is your game of the year for 2013? Ah, yes, 2013. It wasn't the best year for gaming, if I'm honest. There were some, there were some good titles in there, but what with the generation transition, I don't know, it did feel a little bit lacking in some respects. There were a few big ones. There was GTA 5, there was The Last of Us, there was Metro Last Light. I played all of those, I liked all of them, and I'd probably rate them top 10, definitely top 15, 20. Same goes for Tomb Raider as well. I quite like the new Tomb Raider, but none of these are my game of the year. I'm going to pick two as my number one spot because, well, that's the sort of thing I'd do. My first game of the year is Forza 5. And I do so with some hesitation, because I know some people think, oh, it's full of microtransactions and they cut out a bunch of content from Forza 4. They did, yeah, alright. If Forza 4 and Forza 5 came out in the same year, I'd probably prefer Forza 4, even despite the graphical upgrades of 5. But I'm a huge fan of the Forza series. Forza 4 didn't come out in the same year as Forza 5, and I loved Forza 5. I played hundreds of hours of it. I wasn't left wanting as far as the number of cars was concerned. There was enough cars. There weren't quite as many as there were in Forza 4, but there were plenty of cars. I wouldn't have minded a few extra tracks, this I will concede. But all of the tracks that were there were brilliant. I mean, the new additions, the Prague City Circuit, fantastic. Bathurst, fantastic. Spa, fantastic. All great circuits. It's a shame that the Nürburgring wasn't in. That is kind of one of the definitive tracks of, well, racing and of the series. But, you know, maybe it's nice to take a tolerance break. Maybe. All I know is, if you look at the number of hours of games that I played, Forza 5 takes up the lion's share. So I'm not going to say that Forza 5 was objectively the best game of 2013, because I don't think it was, but I liked it. As far as my other pick is concerned, it's an indie title called Rogue Legacy. I'm not sure what it was about this game. I think it might have been the randomized castle generation. I love randomized levels because you never know what to expect. And when you pair that with a whole bunch of gear to unlock and a fairly robust progression upgrade system, and everything's hanging off what is a pretty tight action platformer, yeah, I've got to say, yeah, Rogue Legacy, I like it. I like it a lot. Indie games can be hit or miss, but for me, Rogue Legacy was definitely an indie hit, so that gets my Indie Game of the Year 2013 award. So those are my two picks, I'm sticking with them. If you want to ask for 2014, so far, I'd probably give it to Titanfall. But the year is yet young, and I do hope something will top it. Not because Titanfall's bad, just because I want good games. Blackheart Film says, Stu, having reached Gen 5, and since you're planning to go on to the level cap by summer, you should definitely have a good feel for Titanfall by now. So, how do you feel about the time it takes to earn your Titanfall? Personally, I think they're a little too quick and easy to earn, and in the first 2 minutes of the game, you're basically playing with a map full of everyone spamming Titans. I realise it makes it more accessible, but it also makes the Titans feel less valuable, and makes you more reckless with them, since they are such a common commodity. Your thoughts on Titan balance? I think it's quite a delicate thing to balance, and I think it's in the ballpark of where it needs to be. I mean, you have to remember, you do have the core abilities whilst you're in your Titan, so there is still an incentive to keep your Titan alive. I mean, on the Atlas, the damage core can do, well, it can do a lot of damage, believe it or not. You can take on 2 or 3 Titans, and if they're not wise to the fact that you've got the damage core ability active, you can shred that hull in seconds, and sort of shift the balance heavily in your team's favour as a result. Same goes for the Ogre's shield core. Again, you know, if you need to weather the storm and brace yourself for an incoming defence, the additional shield power can prove decisive. And the Strider's dash core, well, that's just funny. So I think, you know, a good Titan pilot, there is an incentive to keep your Titan alive. But conversely, if you want to play recklessly with your Titans, if you want to use your nuclear ejection, you can still do that without having to wait for 10 minutes to get your next one. So I think, you know, there is a balance, and I think it's in the right ballpark. I think if you were going to make the charge timer for your Titan longer, you might have to make the armor a little bit stronger on them. And that, again, it has impact on all sorts of aspects of the balance, so it's not quite as simple as just changing one variable. It impacts a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Overall, I'm happy enough with it as it stands. Maybe in Titanfall 2 we'll see some iteration on the balancing. And you never know, by the time the sequel swings around you might even have a decent campaign and at least some customization. That would be nice. iRock97 says, Hey Stu, have you ever thought about a brief history of video game consoles? As I mentioned in the last bonus, I do think that series concept works best for software and not hardware. But, you know, I'm never going to rule something out 100%. It could happen. I'm fairly certain at this point the next brief history is going to be a brief history of piracy. That's, to clarify, that's the illegal form of piracy, the immoral form of piracy, the nautical form of piracy, yes, the actual seafaring piracy, not the copyright infringement piracy, which isn't really piracy at all if you think about it. I'm not sure how many piratey games there are, but it's a chance for me to revisit Sid Meier's Pirates, and also The Secret of Monkey Island, 2 of my favourite games of all time. And I get to say ahoy there and our mateys a lot, which will be fun. The Lone Wanderer says, why render at 1080p 60? YouTube only supports 30 frames a second. I was talking about workflow last week, and I was talking about how my Blackmagic only supports 720p at 60 frames a second, and I was talking about how I'd like a solution that could actually record 1080p 60. Know that I'm talking about recording footage and not rendering. I'll still render at 1080p 30 because that's what YouTube supports. But in order to record from either the Xbox One or the PS4 or the Wii U, I need a capture solution that works at 60 frames a second, because that's the frame rate of their output. Even if a game runs at like 20 frames a second, the video format is still 60 frames a second, so I need a capture card that can read that 60 frames a second signal. So at the minute with my recording setup, I have to record at 720p 60, even if the game's running at 30 frames per second. So there you go, boring workflow discussion, you're listening to Capture Chat. Taylor Rosenfeld says, what happens if we run out of questions for bonus? I don't know, I guess I'll just talk about my cats for 20 minutes. Or I'll cut the length, or I'll do it bi-weekly. Who knows? Who knows? I don't think we're going to run out of questions anytime soon, though. Frederick's son says, Stu, when filling in any form that requests you to state your occupation, being a YouTuber, what are you obligated to put down? I can't imagine YouTuber will cut it. I normally put down something like video producer, or something, vague like that. It works. Or if I want to be really vague, I can just put self-employed. I mean, what are they going to do? They're going to phone my boss and say, oh, I'd like to check the job title. Yeah, I get to decide, don't I? Gambit says, hey Stu, have you heard about the new Valve controller? It seems like it may be more precise than a traditional controller, and the ergonomics look to be alright. Looks like it could be a solution to your RSI problem, when it's released, that is. I don't know, the more I see the Steam controller, the more I look at it and think, that is another entry in the annals of failed hardware. It's a noble attempt to try and fuse the precision of a mouse and keyboard with that of a controller, but it fails as a mouse and keyboard, and it fails as a controller. So I can't really see it being a success. And, for casual play, a controller is not that bad for an FPS. It's okay. It's not the best input method, but it's okay. Millions of console owners can't be wrong. Noah Lack says, lol Stu, I'm pretty sure iOS is pronounced iOS. Glad to hear about Ted though. I failed to see the problem. You've corrected my pronunciation with the exact same pronunciation. What's going on there? And yes, Ted, he's much better now. We had a phone call from the vets today. We've had his blood test results back, his second blood test results, and his levels are back to normal, so he's pretty much made a full recovery. Now we've just got to wean him off the steroids. Tommy says, was wondering how you came by the old school game footage in your last video. You own the systems? How did you capture them? For the older stuff, I tend to use emulation. Now, I can respect the purists who like to play games on the original hardware, but when it comes to making a video and you've got 50 games to record, emulators do make it a bit easier. And after years of doing stuff like Retro Ahoy and some of the other videos I've been doing recently, I've got a pretty healthy collection of emulators and ROMs. Just don't ask how I obtained them. They're backups, I'll delete them within 24 hours. PJ Davis 05 says, why do you pronounce some words differently? Such as schedule, privacy, beta. Did you just grow up pronouncing it that way? Or did you just think to yourself one day that you wanted to pronounce them differently? This is a question of UK pronunciation versus US pronunciation. So, US would be schedule, UK would be schedule. Privacy versus privacy. Beta versus beta. Basil versus basil. Oregano versus oregano. The list goes on. I don't have any sort of agenda, I just like to be consistent, and because I'm from the UK, I grew up with a lot of UK pronunciations, I prefer to stick to the UK conventions where possible. Many of them are interchangeable. You hear a lot of people in Britain saying stuff like schedule. It's an Americanism that's kind of bled in and it's been assimilated to a certain degree. So I have to make an effort to say schedule. So I stick to one convention to be consistent, and I like to preserve a certain slice of British English where I can. You wouldn't tell a Texan to stop saying y'all. Anyway, we're coming up on time, so I guess I'll stop with the questions and do a bit of a wrap-up. I'm kind of making a conscious effort not to discuss video plans because I don't want to sort of promise something and then because I run into issues later on I have to delay things. I don't want to sort of disappoint people. So I'm not going to go into any specific details, but Titanfall, series, next big thing, starting within a few days. Probably Friday. No promises. Alright, it's a bit of a promise. The video's done, pretty much. For this Titanfall stuff, I've gone all out. I know that Titanfall isn't like the huge runaway success that maybe some people hoped it to be, but as far as I'm concerned, that just makes it easier for me to make a standout video. My goal is to make a video that catches the eye of EA/Respawn. Basically, it's all part of a larger plan to be cast as a voice acting role in Titanfall 2. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, farewell.